All right. I think we're going to start the joint review board Monday, July 31st at 11 o'clock in the room 207. Take a roll call. Diana Ellenbecker is here. We have a representative from Ronconi, and that is Chuck. How do you pronounce your last name?
Lamine.
Okay. And then Mike Sango.
Here.
And we have Brett Waker.
Yes, here.
And Bob Matthews at this time from NWTC is not here. At this next item on the agenda is the election of a chair.
Motion to nominate Diana Ellenbecker as chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Go on to item number 3, the review of the TID annual reports. And as I said, the packet is very thick. So I gave you everything that was going to be submitted. This is how the way they are through the state, you put these reports in. This is the first year that these are required, but the JRB must see them before we submit the final report. So I have submitted what they call a report type of an estimate. As you can see, they don't print out real great, so I put a one-page summary on the front. And what this does is it shows you the TIF number, the type of TIF it is, the name of the TIF. It shows you the creation date, the mandatory term date. It shows you the city's fund balance. These will match to our city CAFR. As of the beginning of 16, it will show you in some different buckets revenues. So you have your tax increment, you have interest, you have computer aids, you have developer agreements, guarantees, some other different type of revenues, and you have expenditures of your capital, your debt service, your developer grants, and you have others. And this, again, will tie back to the cities of Green Bay's CAFR, will be the fund balance for each TIF as of 12/31/16. Then in this report, one of the last items that we had to do was put in something called future project costs. And what those are additional debt payments, additional capital needs, and other expenditures, administrative fees, whatever things that we have projected out till the end of the year. Hello, Bob.
How are you?
Very good. Not sure if there is an agenda. So for me, roll call.
Okay.
And I was so lucky to be elected as chair.
Well, congratulations.
And we just went on to here, so I will
Perfect.
just.
Thank you.
Yep, and the packet was pretty big, so we did not attach it to the.
Okay,
minutes.
great, thank
I'm
you.
going to go through them real quick again. This is the first year that these TID reports were required by the state. And so I have attached the packet, but I did a summary in the front. Goes through the type of TID, the dates, the beginning fund balance as matching in our CAFR, the different kind of revenues that were brought in by each type of TIF, expenditures, and then the fund balance again matching to our CAFR as of 12/31/16. The last column is future project costs, I guess second last column. And what those are any additional expenses that we have till the end of this TIF projected. These are additional debt service, additional guarantees that have to be paid out, additional administrative expenses, any other capital expenses, anything that we believe it will be spent in this TIF. And those are future project costs. And that leaves you a surplus or a deficit. And some of these numbers are pretty staggering. And I did contact the state of Wisconsin saying, this looks funny, you're not allowing me to put any revenues in. You're not showing me, it's not a true picture. And their point was, they need to, if it has a surplus, that would show that this TIF is probably ready to be terminated or to be ended. So in this case, that is why they're only putting additional expenditures. There's no additional revenue shown in those last 2 columns, and that is how we have to report it to the state. So this is the way the reports fell out. Again, this is the expenses for 16. Not sure if anyone has any questions. I know you just got the information, so you didn't have time to review them. So I could actually stop talking for a moment if you want to take a look. Anything you want to add, Kevin?
Yeah, I think just in terms of where, projects are, 2016 for a number of the TIDs is probably where we're going to hit the trough in terms of, where we've made commitments towards projects, but those projects haven't yet fully come online. Most of, a lot of them coming online, 1/1 of 17, or we're only partially assessed, 1/1 of 16. So I think, when you look at that balance of, projects that have gone in, I mean, generally, once a development agreement is reached, especially if you're putting money in upfront, it's 2 or 3 years subsequent before that actual revenue is coming in to pay the debt service. And I think just in terms of when some of these projects were approved, as you know, like construction and other delays sometimes, if they're not on 1/1, you gotta wait a whole year really to kind of catch up. So I think, that way where it looks at, some of these fund balances where they might be, negative or slightly negative, it's an account of that. And I think if you start to look at some of the projections, moving forward, once those properties do come on, and we've already done some preliminary numbers, just looking at, 1/1 of 17, those are gonna bounce back up because those projects are now fully assessed.
So are there any, as you go through a review, that you believe are at risk based off of the timeline, or are you in good position on all of the TIDs? I think that's conceptually what this was intended to be. I don't know that the report out is necessary, but are there any that you would call out as potential risk?
So I've got some opinions. I think Diana might have some opinions. All of them as they project out, I think, by the TID end, come back to the positive balance and net cash flow on there. I think, in some you'd like to always see it sooner than later that happen. I think probably 13 is the furthest out in terms of like really working towards the end of that TIF life to come back into the black. It's not to say though, with some additional development, I mean, it's covering a very core part of our downtown area, and that continues to develop, so it could come back faster. But, in terms of, needing the full life of the TID to get back up there, I think that is one that's there. One of the ones that we've talked about and we discussed a little bit today are 2 TIDs that just aren't doing much either way. Are the, if you look at TID 11, which is Old Main Street, there's a fund balance, but there just hasn't been a ton of activity there. If anything, we've been hurt a little bit, not faulting, but look, school district has gone in and taken some buildings and put them, they moved from taxable to tax exempt. That's, for a property tax standpoint, that hurt the TID, but also, I mean, to look at, they're reinvesting in those buildings and bring people to the area, so, it's something that we support. It just, then the property is taken out for the trail. The Parks has acquired some as well, so just maybe timing hasn't been the best, but that's one we, have talked about considering, would we look at potentially closing that early, or, and I think that's one of the discussions to have in terms of, if we don't really have, a lot of projects on the horizon for that, is it worth keeping it open or looking at other opportunities for that? The other one is 15 in Old North. Same kind of situation in terms of, I think, what is created, looking at some potential projects in that area just didn't materialize. And I think, again, there's just not a whole lot of activity there, and is it worth keeping it open? As you know, as the TID goes further on, sometimes it gets harder to do a project because you only have so much time to pay the increment back and get that incentive. But I think, I don't know if you have any other opinions on the rest of them in terms of.
No,
So is there no tax increment at 15? I mean, is there future, I mean, because you can't pay off you can never get back if there's no tax increment.
Correct. Yep, and that's one, it's been the same situation. I mean, a lot of those properties are in a floodplain. The redevelopment authority acquired a number of parcels. Now, some of those parcels have been transferred back into private hands, but a number of properties also, just again being in the floodplain, got taken down and then get put back up.
and that $10,000 revenue on that line happened to be a sale of property.
Correct.
That was the only revenue really sourced for 2016.
So we may see that get closer to even in terms of increment as those properties went from the RDA back into private hands.
Okay.
But yeah, that's why we look at both 11 and 15 in terms of that increment, trying to get back 20.
So in the future project costs, are those musts or nice to haves, or what are those? Because again, you know, obviously if you're in a current positive fund balance position on 11, and you don't have to spend the 551, you're going to be more prudent. But are you obligated for the 551, or is that based off of future
You're looking at 11?
opportunities? Yeah, number 11. Because you go negative based on having to spend that, and the question is, so I don't have to spend it, then I can close it out, and there's no impact to the city.
Right. Are you pulling up?
I was gonna get to the
Okay.
TIF, yeah, so some of the, within there are some, every year we have to charge a small portion of administrative costs back to the TIF. So within that number, we would have some small amount for administrative costs. There, and for TIF 11, I can see there was debt service for 16, I assume there's debt service, going forward, yeah. I haven't pulled it up yet. There is some debt service actually, TIF 11, with debt service that goes out to 2028. It's a 2008 bonding.
Just pulling up to see if that's, do you have that project list, was that one on there, or was that for
Oh,
the,
yes.
for the street? I think that might have been for some infrastructure improvements, because we don't have a development agreement there, which might have been towards, I'm just gonna pull that up.
Looks like $30,000 of principal on long-term debt.
You know, 3,800 on other.
The 3,800 on other, small charge for administrative fees. Also, we had a small portion of the annual audit gets charged back. And then also this was a year where we had to have an annual TID audit done in 2016. So there was a charge from our auditor for that one. That one hasn't had a TID audit for for quite a long time. So those are what, that's what makes up some of the others for the current year.
So is that part of the 10,000 for the administration expenses, the TID audit? Or is that under the other expenditures, the 30,800?
The 40,800?
Yeah, you got 30,800 on other expenditures subtotal. Principal and long-term debt, 30,000, interest and fiscal charges, 10,446, and you got administration for 10,000. Not a lot of activity here unless, like you said, if your audit came up, then that explains some of that.
We're talking TID 11 here.
TID 11,
correct?
correct.
If you look on page, it says page 3, but it says other expenditures, and that's where there was a Old Main bid payment of 30,000. A DOR, the annual payment we have to put on, we have to pay $150 every year to the DOR, and then we had charged a portion for the annual audit of $650,000. I have $650.
So the 10,000 administration is typically salaries, I'm assuming?
Yep, salaries, chargebacks for administration, and that is prorated based on hours spent on that TID.
Looks like there's some type of
Debt service.
true tieback versus just a general allocation to any TID. So it looks like it's based off of effort on the
Yes.
admin costs, because this is lower than some of the other TIDs.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're talking, I mean, it's not perfect, but we try and look, ones where we spend a lot of time and a lot of activity and get a higher chargeback rate than ones where it's just like, look, we need to go in, maintenance, reporting, just basic.
Total cost divided by number of TIDs, that's not the process.
Correct, yes, some kids need definitely more work and do more work than others.
And again, this is the Old Main bid payment was one that had been agreed to on for several years. And in 2016, it was yet last year, there was an agreement that this would be the last year we would pay not a TID agreement, a bid payment to Old Main.
I was just pulling up the bond on that, so it's a 2008, we funded in 2015. Do you know the original 2008 agreement or purpose? I'm sure I can pull that out in the project plan. That went to the streetscape. Okay.
Apologize, I'm catching up on, I've only been working with the TIDs for the last couple of months, so I'm still trying to get familiar with all the TIDs.
I think, just pulling, I think some of the, excuse me, money might have went towards the trail, the East River Trail, towards acquisition.
In 2008.
So that's the other expenditures?
The debt service,
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
2008 bonding.
And the university TID's not on here because,
It's not recorded by the state yet, so it was not even a record, next year it will start showing up. In our CAFR, we had very, very little activity for TID 18. In 2016, there was 15,596 spent on conservation and development under expenditure. So at this point, it had a negative fund balance of 15,000. There was no revenue at that point had come in. So very little activity for that TID in 16.
So with the new festival project, I'm just gonna pull up. So far, as of 1/1/17, there's about 8.5 million of increment, which is the grocery store, and then just the small shops. We anticipate that probably going up another 1.5 million, maybe more, once Quick Trip is constructed and goes up on that parcel. So that will be reflected in 2017. In 2018, you may see some development with the JBS site, but more likely that will probably be a 1/1/19 when that starts being fully assessed. And that's increment. That property, the festival parcels had a base value, even though it was kind of junk, like $3 million, because it was valuable property and location. So all in, it's being assessed just under 13 million right now, or 12 million right now.
do you think there's any risk on 5 at all or not? I'm just looking at the time to recapture and the amount of future projected costs and, you know, your debt service outpaces your tax increments, and I don't know if there are more developer grants in there, but you've got about 80 or close that out. I don't know if there's other additional item or parcels coming out of the tax roll, but that one looks, just scanning it.
If I, from 16 to 17, the value went up $14.3 million. The Metro apartments came online.
Okay.
So we have an increase of $14.3 million
Okay.
over 16 value. So again, we're not seeing it this year.
Got it.
We had some large expenses for the Metro. There were some development agreements
Okay.
and that were paid out in 15 and 16, which drove that one to look probably unfavorable. But the Metro came online and adding some nice increment.
Good, thank you.
And that's one we've also, project that we talked about, the Cherry Street ramp. And then there's one other one, we did with, actually two other ones, with, on Broadway, the Lorenzen, the Pete's Bike, that historic rehab,
Mhm.
and then the Hibernia House. Those have all been pay-go, just because,
Okay.
given the time left in it,
Mhm.
look, if you make it, you can get it back, but if you don't, you're not getting it. So we haven't put
Okay.
any upfront money into that, just given, again, yeah, the time crunch to get it repaid.
Any other questions on these reports? Again, part of the goal for this meeting was to have the JRB review or see the reports. And then at this point, then I can go and submitted the final one, so I have the deadline of August 2nd, which is Wednesday, to have them submitted. I guess we would receive and place on file at this point.
One of the things that I've seen from other communities is just kind of is the projection.
Okay.
You know, because that's, I mean, you answered the question beautifully in terms of, hey, there's some things that are coming online, but it gives us a quick review of, hey, here's what's at risk and here's what's not. It's not part of this format per se, but I think everybody's trying to make sure that everybody is comfortable that we are or are not in good position. So that'd just be a request moving forward.
Absolutely.
Military Avenue, TIF 16, we did the reset on that. How is that looking now? Are we more comfortable with where we're at?
Better. I think the reset was right before, again, everything
Yeah.
the county would have reset.
I do have an additional report I could also hand out. It just shows you what the base value is, and now this one has the new revised base value for
Yes.
16. Shows you what 16 was, 15 was in 16, the dollar change, and it also shows you what total increment is from the beginning. I can share that report. That will show where TID 16 at least shows now about $8 million increments since the beginning, since the base. And again, the reason my 17 numbers are not included, one, they're not at the state yet, and the manufacturing numbers are not included. We have the real estate portion. We have them in spreadsheets, they're just not at the state level yet finalized. And as you know, at the state, there is a 12% test. And that is the sum of all TID value increments is divided by your equalized. And that any new TID in their formula could be created if you're under the 12% test. And the city of Green Bay is at 4.06, so we're not even coming close to maxing it. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Any other questions on that report?
So just, I'm going back and after seeing this, so 11 and 15, is there any benefit to close those out now and just take your lumps, or
Well, and that's, I guess, one of the things we've discussed, but we also want to discuss with JRB, is that one in terms of, look, if we do close them out, and there's still obligations remaining, and from where are those funds going to come? There's a process where, look, the city can take the hit, or we can also look at some of our other TIDs that are healthier and donating excess from that to basically close it out. I haven't been a part of that, and I don't know when the last time there was a transfer in between TIDs. But that would be something I think, worth discussion, maybe get a little preliminary feedback here, and if we want to put it on the docket for our meetings, future meetings, if now is the time. And I think you see both, I think 11 and 15 are the ones that are ripe for that discussion. Just given where look, there's no increment in the same aspect. I mean, there's not a ton of outstanding project costs. Some of that being admin in the future. So really, when it comes down to it, the debt service, I think, pulling that out for 11. It's 40,000. I think all in maybe adds up to, I think, like 300,000 or 330,000. So it's not the full 550 that's there. I mean, you take away the admin. And I don't know if that's something that the JRB would consider in terms of, I think, probably the healthiest is to 12. There's still some expenses out there that we'd like to see. I think, two, we've talked about the redevelopment of Erie Road, which is kind of like the next one after Huron in terms of getting that up to standards to basically facilitate further expansion east of the I-43 Business Park. Then also some sanitary sewer and water extension out to that area, again, to continue the development. We put that in terms of cost, and even with that, we'll still have some, I guess, ample funds available in terms of if there are other projects that come through, or in terms of being a donor TID to one of the others, basically to close it out. You've been here a little longer, so last time that TID was a donor to another?
I've been here 2 years, so I don't
Okay.
know. I have not gone through this process.
I
I've
have.
seen it.
Do we have donor TIDs on any of these other ones? I think that's usually in the report, or am I missing it? Or is that a different?
You would call out if it's a donor, because it will show the revenues coming in from other TIDs. I just don't know if that's
Correct. And my understanding, there hasn't been any donations.
Okay.
I mean, I've only been here 2 years, but I don't know, and that's why I asked.
None of
in
these
terms last
existing,
time.
none of these existing are donors right now to others.
Correct, and that would be an action of JRB. If we were to do something
Okay.
between
right.
the city, come in and close it out, that'd be a separate process. But in terms of, JRB recommendations, that would be up to this board to make a recommendation to our council to.
So you're thinking the I-43 is the healthiest one, the number 12?
Yes, and that would be one, I guess, 3 that, and there's one more that we talked about. There's 11 Old Main Street, 15 Old North, and actually one of the older ones, the 6, the New East Side neighborhood, that's Navarino. Again, it's Navarino's healthy enough, but there's not really like a lot of future projects coming in there. And then one of the things I wanted to talk about is some areas for new TIDs that we were looking, and is it better to close one out and replace it for where the development is ripe? I think one of the things that we're trying to do is get good about 2 things. One, the boundaries and the timing. And then just making sure that, we're doing the TIDs and the project's ripe so that we can take advantage of it. It doesn't do good to have a huge TID and then it sits for, 5, 6, 7 years with no development on it. So those would be the 3 that we'd be, considering in terms of being able to potentially close out. I think Old Main Street and Old North, for sure, most likely, and Navarino, I think we got to dig in numbers a little bit. But that might be another one in terms of being able to move on to other projects.
On the I-43, the future project cost, you're still showing 8.5 million. Is that for development agreements, or is that, because
I think you just talked about some additional sewer and.
Yep, so we put in there the cost of Erie Road and some additional sewer and water, and those are planned to be just paid for with cash.
Okay.
That was the projection, is that there's enough in there right now. Erie Road reconstruction was, what, 2.5 million?
So would you look to take potentially 6, 11, and 13, roll them up under 12 and close them in 2025? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
In terms of, for the timing,
Yeah.
is that look at closing them either,
Accelerate their closing and,
close them now, and so 1/1 of 18 they'd be closed.
okay.
And that way, those all go back onto the tax rolls.
Okay.
If we look at, in a way for, looking in terms of, look, if we don't anticipate any additional projects coming through and there's not outstanding balances, we can figure out a way, like I said, some of them, there's debt service, which we'd have to take care of, but the admin cost, if you pull those out, the future project cost here is probably gonna be less than what's anticipated once you pull out those admin costs. And looking at, is that a better way then to, get those properties back on the tax roll, back to the checking jurisdictions faster rather than just holding them. And I think general practice, once it goes into a TID, you'd love to accelerate it. If you freeze it at 10, to get it up to 40, 50, but if it's gonna be sitting for another few years frozen, and maybe come out, what, 1 million more? If not, I mean, is it really in all of our best interest to keep that frozen, or should we pull it off and just get those taxes back on?
Back to your question on the TID, on 12, yes, we've built in $3 million in 2019 for Erie Road construction, future project costs. And then there's also a developer, a Pago, that is also in there. So that's what's incorporated in those future project costs.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Looks like we kind of tackled 3, which is the review of the annual report, and 4, staff report on the performance and status of each district governed by the board. Any other questions on 3 or 4? As Kevin said, do we have to take a motion on this? Do you think, or receive and place on file?
Yeah, I wouldn't just kind of accept it.
We can separate, receive and place on file the review of the TID annual reports.
Second. Are you making a motion, or you want
Or
me to make
somebody
a
else wants to
motion?
make a motion?
Or I'll make a motion to receive and put on file
I'll
Okay.
second.
TID reports. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Next one is staff report on the performance and status of each district. We did take note on some additional information you would want to see in the future. Do you want to take a motion to receive that and place on file?
So moved. Make a motion on staff report with additions, comments.
I'm not sure we need to, I
Okay.
think we just need to approve the.
On the annual report, because
Yeah,
that's.
the annual reports, I
Okay.
think that's one thing we need to approve.
And then the next item is set a meeting date, and as Kevin had said, we would like to make some recommendations on possible either changing, adds, potential closures. So I guess I would turn it over to Kevin.
Sure. So I think, we went over a little bit of 3 potential closures, 6, 11, and 15. And we'll dig into the numbers a little bit and I think present, what it would, cost to close those out, with the notion that we'd probably use TID 12 to be able to close those, just in terms of keeping things within the TID or just inter-TID balances. 3 that we've looked at as potential for new TIDs, and we have some preliminary ideas. One is South Broadway area, which would be associated with the shipyard project. When council approved the term sheet last year, one of the things they said is that they don't want the shipyard project to be on the tax levy or on the general levy. So in order to get that project to work, we would need to create a TID. Within future development, the increment would help pay for the debt service of the stadium itself. We've been working, just quick aside, on the project to look at some financing options of how to make that work in terms of maybe delaying some of the costs, or when payments would be due so that we could use some of that increment to pay for the debt service. One of the things that council also discussed is if we do a TID, that they would like to see it kind of go down South Broadway, down towards 9th Street, so that some of the businesses along South Broadway could also benefit. This is basically right at the edge. There's there'll be a little overlap with TID 5. TID 5 kind of comes down. It does cover the shipyard parcels right now on the boat slip, and stops just short of the White Store. So we would probably be looking at a district that took the shipyard parcels and went down towards 9th Street, basically along the Broadway corridor. There has been some discussion about potentially including the old intermodal site by CN, but I think that's still a few more years out yet, and just in terms of timing, I would rather wait and see of either do you propose an extension of the TID or expansion of the TID or a new TID for that area. I just feel in terms of like projects that are right, the shipyard and some development potential we've had with the northern side of the site, that those would be ready to go. Based on council's direction though, I mean, they would like to see it, I think, go down towards 9th Street. I don't know if they have something quite there yet, but maybe politically that's something we have to consider in doing that. So that would be one proposal. The second would be for Easttown Mall and Cub Foods. TID 10, Main and Mason, is just to the north and west of the intersection of Main and Mason, but does not come down and cover this area here, the former Cub Foods and Easttown Mall area. Initially, we looked at some projections, potentially expanding TID 10 into this area, and just creating an expanded district. Or we look at the potential of a new TID that would look at basically the U-Haul site, primarily Cub Foods and the Easttown Mall site, with potential for expansion to the U-Haul site. Look, I know the U-Haul site has been quote-unquote redeveloped, but it's probably not its highest and best use. So I think there could be some potential for the future there. And this would look at being able to facilitate the redevelopment of Cub Foods and Easttown Mall. The Cub Foods move forward with a development agreement. We said that we would either expand TID 10 or create a new TID for this area. They're moving ahead. They understand. I mean, JRB still has to make a decision on that, but felt, given at minimum, expanding TID 10, it would fit in with the intention of that district. But we also looked at, again, potential for a new district here. The urban planner in me sees a ton of surface parking out here, and talking to some of the developers, look, there's potential for getting additional development kind of on that outer ring road there, so that could facilitate some higher and denser use. I think long-term, we see this, developing really kind of a neighborhood center. Maybe not quite yet, like Bay Shore or Midvale and Madison, but, long-term, I think there's high potential to get a lot more than just some big box stores here. And then the third one, this is what we talked about, kind of Navarino, would be the Whitney School area. And looking, there's a developer who's got a term sheet for developing Whitney School and some townhomes around this area. Potentially looking at, again, either expanding TID 6, Navarino, up into this area, or looking at maybe taking 3 or 4 blocks here to get a little bit of larger project. There's some small businesses, a number of rental properties in this area. The city redevelopment authority owns a chunk of land right here. And talking about this area as kind of a potential, primarily probably focused on some residential development, but with some mixed use as well. So those would be 3 areas that we've potentially talked about kind of being the next 2 districts. I guess, again, from just staff perspective, I think we'd like to keep them as small as possible, and really kind of related to projects that we have, either a term sheet or development agreement for right now, or something where there's something in the queue. Again, with the potential of expansion in the future, but right now those are kind of 3 that we'd be bringing forth for your consideration.
And the timing on that would be?
We would like to do that this year, and I'll put up some proposed meeting dates so that they'd be effective 1/1 of 18. Probably the The one with a little uncertainty right now is the East Town Mall. I think I made it clear with the developers, we have a term sheet, some things I think have changed. I think, Chuck, you know, that the county said no in terms of the library at this location, or at least renting here. I think, you know, there's still maybe an opportunity to build a structure. But I just want to make sure that before we go forward and put this into a TID, we have a development agreement to do that. Because worst case would be it goes into a TID and then somebody tears them all down and there goes all the value and you're starting in the hole. So that will only happen if we have concurrently a development agreement to do that. So with that, just some dates that we'd probably be looking at for August. I think we will plan on asking the redevelopment authority to be the body that holds the public hearing. I think we've done that in years past. I know by statute it's plan commission, but because the redevelopment authority has generally been involved in most development agreements, we felt that's an appropriate body to do so. So with that, we would look at having our meetings probably the last full week in August, and that would be where GRB would have their initial meeting where we present our findings and recommendations, and then that would be followed by RDA holding a public hearing. If we do it in that time frame, that'd be enough for us to have council adopt a municipal resolution in September. Then we just would meet after that to approve everything and submit our paperwork to the state basically by the end of September, so that they would be online 1/1 of 18. Excuse me. Now with that, there is a little flexibility in here to move some of these around. I just kind of propose these out here as some tentative dates. I mean, the council dates are already set. I mean, so those are existing meetings, so working with those helps us get it into the queue. If we'd like to do this for 1/1 of 18. There's also a chart of all the other publications and letters and all those things, which just make sure we get all our paperwork out. The goal would be then probably, prior to this meeting, probably by mid-August, by this council date, is to get you some of that information of here's what we're proposing, to give you time to look through and say, all right, here are the proposed project plans, here's, if we're going to propose doing a transfer, here's what it would be, so it'd be time if you wanted to ask questions before that meeting to make a recommendation at your meeting. So I'm putting this out there. I don't know if like right away there's any like vacations. I'm just kind of throw this for a loop, or we maybe have to look a little differently.
I think Chad's probably going to be taking it on. I know
Okay.
he's in the middle of budget meetings, but this is important.
Sure.
So I'm sure he'll try to figure a way to make it work.
Okay.
I'd just coordinate directly with Chad on it.
Okay.
What time are you looking at? How long?
We'll be flexible in terms of meeting when you can, in terms of the days or the time. For that first GRB meeting, I would guess probably if we're going to be looking at potential closure, potential transfer, and potential new ones, I'd probably say 90 minutes. And we can be flexible in terms of when we want to meet for that. Public hearing, I mean, you're welcome to attend, but that'll be RDA holding that, so we'll work with them to kind of fit in their schedule. And then the final meeting, generally, that last one, I think those generally average like 30 minutes or less. I mean, basically it's if there's any last minute changes or just final approvals. But the meeting A, I called it just to separate them in the time flow. That'll probably be the meatiest one, and that'll probably be, like I said, 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours.
Do you prefer a during the day meeting, or would you prefer an evening meeting?
I don't care. I don't care.
It doesn't matter.
Probably during, later day, afternoon or.
Okay. Are you talking like a 3 o'clock in the afternoon type of meeting? Or do you think a little later, more like 4 or 5?
Are there any days that are like out? Because then I can get at the end, I'd just maybe call and coordinate significant or doable and give it time.
Yeah,
Any of those, 29, 30, or 31?
I don't see any big conflicts right now.
Okay. Let me-
3 or 4.
Okay. And, yeah, we'll talk to Deanna and have, see what we can get together and then get that on the docket.
I didn't have any other topics.
No, that's.
Any other questions from you? Adjourn. Thank you for attending.
Yeah, will do.